Hi, so this is just a little vlog on racism, which is kind of a hard topic to address, and it's hard to just know how to go about it because it's very touchy, but that's almost the why it's so important, because it is so touchy, and I think that it shouldn't be like that. It should be more talked about, and that's how people will essentially learn that things that they do are racist, or they are participating in racism. Maybe not by, like, they are not purposely doing it, but they're doing it. And so talking about racism and putting it into our school systems and just like really encouraging students and just people in general in the world to learn about racism and honestly how awful of a system it is so crucial to like stopping it. So I wanted to talk here today more about racism, but I have this book, Readings for Diversity and Social Justice. It is my textbook for my education class. And so I wanted to talk today about racism, and there's quite a lot in here about racism, but as I'm going through the chapter, I'm reading about it. I wanted to touch on this one part that really just stuck out, and it was right at the beginning. And it said, David Wellman defines racism as a system of advantage based on race. In illustrating this definition, he provides example after example of how whites defend their racial advantage, access to better schools, housing, jobs, even when they do not embrace overtly prejudicial thinking. Racism cannot fully be explained as an expression of prejudice alone. So what this is talking about is the systematic advantage of being white. And being white automatically puts you on the pyramid of how just your privilege, on the pyramid of privilege. It puts you automatically on the top, because every single other race because whites are superior and that sounds awful, but according to societal norms, the white race would be superior and every other race is essentially oppressed. It shouldn't be like this, but it is. So whiteness has been a thing since the Pilgrims came over and started colonies in the 13 colonies in the East. And I actually recently went to a conference. Well, it wasn't a conference, it was a presentation, and there was a speaker there, and she was talking all about whiteness. And I was like, okay, whiteness, interesting. I understand it. There's white people in the country, there's racism, simple. Well, she really opened my eyes in that the problem is that we might not even think that we're being racist, but we are. And she gave this example of herself, which was bold of her, I almost thought, but really showed that like it's okay to acknowledge that you're doing this, and I think it's important too. So she gave this example of how she noticed that after she was studying this topic of whiteness and racism and everything in that area, she would notice herself, like she would be driving. Gave this example, she's driving down the street and she sees a black person walking down the street, and she automatically locks her doors. She would see a white person, no problem, would not lock her doors, all is well. And that's when she realized that she was a racist. And she's like, that term is so negative. And it is. It's awful to be a racist. But it's so negative that people are like, oh, I'm not a racist. There's no way I can be a racist. That's so bad. I am not that bad of a person. But it's everyday things like that that also make you contribute to the problem of racism. And I sat there and I'm like, I couldn't remember a specific time when I had done that, but I figured, I'm sure I've done that before. Just racism just being put into my head, something that I've learned over the course of time that would make me do certain things like that, not thinking, but I still do it. And that really just brought my attention. I'm like, how do we stop this? And we talked about this in class a little bit while the presentation about racism was going on, about what can we do as people in society. How can we do our part and stop racism? Because it's clearly a huge problem, and it has been since, like I said, since the 1700s. And so I'm sitting there, we're talking about it, we're thinking in class, and automatically I think I started thinking about the speaker talking about whiteness and what she said to me, or the whole room. And I just remember about how she continued to talk about how racism is learned. And I sat there, and as a future educator, I was in awe. And I was so surprised that I had never even thought about this before, or like thought of it being a problem almost, or anything like that. But as a future educator, I'm like, I could do so much to stop this problem. And so fast rewind, we're in class, and we're talking about racism, and the group is presenting, and we were brainstorming, kind of throwing out ideas on how we can stop racism, essentially. And I threw out the idea that racism is something that we learn as white people, and you are not born a racist, and you are not born with the knowledge of that whites are superior and every other race is oppressed, and that's how things should be. That is not how babies are born. That's not a genetic thing. It's learned. And it is learned immediately from your parents, your caregivers, the people who are with you right from birth to around age 4-ish, before you're in school. But the second part of it is it keeps developing, those thoughts keep developing as you are going through school and other institutions. So in class, suggested that it's the fact that racism is being learned that needs to be talked about, and especially in our education classes. And so what this all brings back and connects to me, the book, the presentation in class, the speaker presentation that I went to about whiteness and everything around that. What this is teaching me personally is that racism is learned, and that as a teacher that I will be, as a teacher, I have the power to change this, because students are put in diverse situations. Essentially, a school is where they are going to be put with the most diverse people before they go into the workforce or go into normal adult life. But they are going to be around all sorts of people, and it is at that moment that it is crucial for them to learn about racism, all of the true aspects of it, teach them every single piece of history that the white curriculum has left out, and inform them on that, and inform them on how they can go about not doing this, and how they may have these thoughts that have been ingrained in their minds, but teaching them how to be essentially not racist is what I believe to be the first step in diminishing racism. So I, as a teacher, look at racism obviously as a bad thing. It is. But it is a place where we can look at it, we acknowledge it, and we can only go up, I believe. I think we can learn from it, say, this was not okay, and this is how we need to go further in our lives, and not be racist, appreciate all races, because our world is incredibly filled with every single different type of person. No person is the same, and we need to be appreciative of that, because that is what makes the world go round, all of these different people. And teaching young children not to be racist, but also not leaving out the parts that history has conveniently left out for the white people, to make them look continually still superior in comparison to all of these other races. So as a future educator, I think that we can take this and go from here and teach others and inform others of what's happening, give them everything that they need to know so that they can go forth and continue to spread the word on why racism is bad, and continue to enact in ways that would make them not racist, basically. So essentially, you just teach them about racism and how bad it is, and then ideally they will learn and stop, and that will continue for centuries if that is something that we normalize in our school education. So